So, in this official Pelican 1170 case, as the tag so aptly points out, genuine Pelican case, which will be talked about later, is the final mystery revealed from my little Russian Arab video that I made earlier. I was supposed to make the follow-up video that much sooner. My grandmother passed away this last Wednesday, and we've been dealing with that, but now it is time. And as the title takes away all the mystery from, what we have here is the Walther P99 9mm versus 40 Smith & Wesson. You do not see too many of these videos on YouTube because it's pretty rare to see somebody with a Walther P99. I always get a smile on my face when I actually do, but it's also rare to see people with two, and it's rare to see people with them in two different calibers. I think there might be one other person on here that has them. But it's pretty rare to see this comparison. So hopefully I can tell you the difference between the two, because there are differences between the two firearms, even though they're the same model. And I will discuss them here and which one I prefer and why. So here it is. Let's get ahead and finally show this thing. So let's open up this Pelican case here. Very nice Pelican case that I got just for this gun. And here it is. Doesn't that look cool? In fact, I specifically made this case with the pick and pluck foam to fit this gun, but again, this isn't about the case. So let's take the gun out, and let's take this magazine out, and we'll move the case over to the side, and we'll move this magazine over here just for looks. Look at that idiot! He lives in New York. He's got that restrictor mag. We'll talk about that in a second. So here it is. It is in fact loaded, but I do not have one in the chamber. But here it is. You may have seen this, you may have seen a P99 on my channel before if you've been paying any attention whatsoever, because I already own one. In fact, I already own this one right here. So it was not some sort of strange sorcery that changed those calibers in that last video. It was in fact me switching them when I pretended to cough. But here they are, both of them. The top one in the 9mm and the bottom one in the 40. So let's talk about the differences and which one I like better. First of all, if you've never seen the rounds, let's take a look at them. I only have snap caps in 40 because I'm literally out of Full Metal Jacket 40 Smith & Wesson because I was shooting it like a shooting person. But here is, get a 9mm, a comparison of the two rounds if you've never actually seen them and seen them side by side. Obviously, the one on the left is the 40, and the one on the right is the 9mm. You can definitely see that the 40 is larger. Hey, look, there's a hair on there. Let's get you off of there. You're kind of ruining my shot. The one on the left is the 40, the one on the right is 9mm. 40s are almost always, I'm thinking 99.9 or 100% flat nose, because it has something to do with the size restrictions, and they wanted it to fit on a 9mm frame. And they wanted, that's why it's flat nose, something like that. I read about that before. But 40 was designed as a shortened down 10mm. But here they are. Let's take a look at the back of them. On the back, they look pretty similar. Like I said, you're only talking about 0.05 of an inch larger, pretty much. So, I mean, it's not tremendously larger. But here are the two rounds, in case you're interested. The grains typically, if you're talking about that, are the 9mm, the cheap ones that you shoot are typically the 115 grain, the 40 are 180 grain. Yes, you can get 124 grain and 146 grain or 42 grain on the 9mm, and yes, you can get 165 grain on the 40, but typically the cheap ones that you shoot are the 115 and the 180 grain, so that'll give you an idea of the different weights of the bullets. Now, as for the guns, this is the 9mm one here, the new one. Let's talk about this first because we haven't seen it yet. This is just the same Gen 1 as the 40. It is the 9mm version, though, obviously. It was imported by Interarms, as we see here. And Interarms were the first importers of these firearms to the U.S. This is an extremely early P99. So early, in fact, that it still has a couple of key features, like this split trigger. I hope we can really focus on this because this is very interesting and I want to show this. So if we get the lighting right, yes we can. You see that the trigger is split here. Let me take out my knife as a pointer. It is split right here, as opposed to the 40 version, which is not split. This is not a difference between the caliber versions. This is a difference because it was such an early model. But as to the split trigger here, the reason it is split is because this little tab that hangs down right here does the same thing as the Glock Safe Action trigger does. It hangs down a little bit, so you have to pull directly on the trigger for it to move out of the way and pull the trigger back. If you grab it at the absolute top, as in you don't have a good grip on it, it will lock up, just like if you do it with the Glock safe action trigger. It does the same thing. It's got a little piece dangling down. Here's my Glock 26. Little piece dangling down there. When you pull it, it moves out of the way so the trigger can go back. So they got rid of this after a while because they thought it was kind of ineffective. I'm glad that they did. I don't like any safeties on my pistols, whether that even be the trigger safety. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the trigger safety if you're gonna have it. I mean, it doesn't terribly bother me, but I really don't want anything that could impede my shooting of the weapon. I don't know. I just don't like it, especially in a defensive firearm like this is designed as. So that's one of the differences. Another one, probably the main difference that you might notice between the 9mm and the 40 Smith & Wesson version, is the milling on the front of the slide. Notice, milled out here. After we get after the P99, this bit is milled out. 40, not milled out. It just goes straight across. Let's see if we can get a comparison shot of these two. See, so you can see the differences there. I have to say, much prefer the look of the milled out one. That is just like the true P99 classic lines with that milled out front there. It also reduces the weight a little bit. It was something to do with the recoil of the 9mm. The reason they did it was to reduce the weight of the slide. If you look at it from the top, you can see that it gets pinched in where both sides are milled. Of course, it's milled on both sides. I much prefer the look of that milling as opposed to just it going straight with the 40. With that milling also comes the weight. I don't know what the actual weights are. Wikipedia, and of course we know that's the most reliable site on the internet, states that the 40 is exactly 1 ounce or 1.1 ounces heavier than the 9mm. I don't know if that's the actual measurement, but I will tell you this. The 9mm is lighter than the 40. Noticeably lighter. In fact, when I picked it up, it was kind of like picking up the, if you ever played PlayStation, the 6-axis controller versus the DualShock controller, or if you have an iPhone, the iPhone 4, and then picking up the iPhone 5. Quite a noticeable difference, and when you're holding it, this thing feels like a brick after shooting the 9mm now. The 9mm, it seems like the right weight for this weapon. This seems like it might be a little bit heavy. I guess that makes sense considering the 9mm is what the gun was designed in. So another difference is obviously the caliber, so I'm going to go ahead and take both of these down so you can see the internals of both. They're very similar. In fact, the frames are exactly the same, but there are some more differences inside, so I'll take both of these down. Let's see how fast I can get these stripped. So, ready, 3, 2, 1, go. Alright, so they're both down. Haha, I know what you're saying though. You're saying, man, those look pretty similar. I wonder if you can put different slides on different frames. Well, let me explain that to you as Thumper, the ski instructor from South Park, would. Alright guys, I see what you got here. You got 2 different slides. Let me tell you what, if you're going to switch the slides on different frames, you're going to have a bad time. You don't have a bad time. If you switch the slides on different frames, you're going to have a bad time. Yes, you're going to have a bad time because let's see here. This is the 9mm frame. This is the 40 slide. I will show you for your entertainment that you cannot, in fact, put them on the opposite frames. You get to about here, and then you can't get it fully on. And it's a pain in the ass to get back off. You have to do it in the same manner you would get the slide off if you put the slide on with no barrel and recoil assembly in it. You push it forward. It didn't have to do it that time, but typically you have to pull the trigger because it gets hung up on the trigger bar there. So I'm not going to do it on the other one. I said I was going to, but I'm not going to because they are a bit of a pain in the ass. So they will not function on opposite frames. Don't try it. So I'm just letting you know that if you want to use the interchangeable frames. But the difference is, like I said, recoil spring exactly the same. They did that on purpose, so I will try not to get those mixed up. I'd like to keep them with their respective calibers. Let's remember I'm putting the 9mm recoil spring to the left of the screen. So, let's take a look at the barrels. Actually, let's take a look at the internals so you can see that the internals are pretty much the same. We have the 9mm on the right, obviously. Pretty much the same. And then you can obviously see that a barrel is a little bit beefier on the left. Pop it out here. Let's move these frames to the side. Pop this barrel out. There we are. And here's the 2 barrels. Obviously, I'm going to line them up back to back So you can see that the 40 barrel is a little bit longer. 40 is on the top. It's a little bit longer, and strangely enough, I think this has to do with the importing. The top, I'll bring this up so you can see it. The top has gold-filled information. By the way, steal my serial numbers, all you thieves out there. Again, they're all registered in New York because we live in the People's Republic of New York. So if you steal my serial numbers, don't be surprised if some black vans show up to your house with a couple of questions for you as to why you have YouTube personality Speed Dog 138 serial number as something that you're trying to report. Anyway, but here they are. It has the gold fill on the top. It doesn't on the bottom, but they have the same information. The Walther logo, the eagle over end proof mark showing that it was proofed in Germany, and the serial numbers, and 40 Smith & Wesson, and here it says 9mm by 19. You know, funny aside here, I have seen 9mm represented as so many different ways, it's unbelievable. I've seen it as 9 by 19. In fact, to see it as 9 by 19, all you have to do is come back here. I've seen it as 9 by 19, 9mm by 19, 9mm NATO, 9mm Parabellum. First time I saw it as 9mm Parabellum was in a Resident Evil game, but that is completely besides the point. It just seems like one of those calibers that likes to have as many names as possible. So there are the barrel differences. Move that aside. Capacity. Let's talk about capacity. Let's see. Here's the 9mm mag. Let me get my 40 wherever it went in all these Walther parts. It's like I'm in heaven here. Okay, let's talk about capacity. In New York, it's easy. 10 for both. Because you may not have known this, but 10 rounds make you a regular upstanding citizen. 11 makes you a mass maniac. You may not have known that, and if you didn't know that, you probably have an IQ over that of a cantaloupe, like, I'm not going to say Michael Bloomberg, but Michael Bloomberg and all those other morons that are trying to pass such idiotic regulations. By the way, I wish I had a large cup of soda. That'd be great, because then I could be like, oh my god, look at this large cup of soda, it's all illegal. And that's besides the point. Actual capacity, not New York gimped capacity, is 12 for the 40 Smith & Wesson, 15, and if you get some of the early ones, which probably would have come with this early 9mm, 16. They took it down to 15 after some reliability issues with the first batch, the first magazines. Speaking of early, I mentioned this before, let me put my 9mm one back together. If you remember, I said I put the recoil somebody to the left of the screen. Were you paying attention? There's a quiz at the end. So let me put it back together. So we take another look at that. Then I will tell you how I came about actually both of these guns, so in case you're interested in buying them, we'll get to that in a second. Here we go, make sure I'm putting it on the right frame because it won't work otherwise. Okay, so here it is again. I mentioned this is a very early one, and you can tell that it's very early because it is serial number 1618. So there it is. That actually means it was the 1,618th P99 ever produced. So early, in fact, that it still has a split trigger. It was still imported by Interarms, and it in fact has the serial number on the frame. Now, this is going to be great for the James Bond fans out there, because not only does it have the serial number on the slide, I just said frame earlier, but I meant slide. Not only does it have the serial number on the slide, you'll remember, if you were paying attention, that the serial number on the back is 1618, of course you will, right there. But if you look at it on the slide, yeah, it's 1618, but it's the 00 version. How about that? It's got a 00 in front of it. Yes, it is got its own license to kill. Good boy. And that's pretty much the differences between the 9mm and the 40. They say, let's put the 40 back together. Where's the barrel and recoil assembly? Here it is. And the slide. They say that the 40 has a thicker slide, but I'm not sure where they're getting this information, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay. Now, according to Wikipedia, again, our very reliable news source, the 40 has a thicker slide. Let me show you why I don't believe that. These frames are both the same. I mentioned that before. They're both the exact same lower frames. And the slide doesn't stick off the end on either of them. Perfectly flush with the frame, perfectly flush with the frame. So therefore, if you have a frame that is exactly the same, and you have two slides, and neither of them stick off, something tells me one of them is not larger than the other. So I think Wikipedia may be a bit wrong in that sense. But that wouldn't be the first time they've ever been wrong. So yeah, I really do think that's the major differences between the two. You have the milling on the front. As I mentioned, I much prefer the 9mm milling. The capacities are different. 12 versus 15. In New York, that's completely irrelevant. The weight is a little bit more on the 40.
So you're probably wondering, why did they do that? Why did they make it a little heavier? It's not just because of the barrel being a little bit bigger. There was a reason that they actually made the slide a little bit heavier on this 40 version. Well, the reason they did it is to maintain the same recoil assembly spring. I mentioned that they were the same earlier, and because you have a snappier round with obviously bigger bullets, they had to increase the mass of the slide so it would slow down. If you had the same mass of the slide and larger bullets coming out of it, it would go back much faster, and that could damage it, or just might not cycle properly because it comes back so fast and goes forward so fast. So they had to make it larger to slow down the slide in order to keep the recoil assembly the same. So that is why the 40 doesn't have that milling on the front, and that is why the 40 has a heavier slide to slow it down. Now you know.
And the thickness may or may not be. Perhaps they measured it up at the front, where this has a milled portion and this doesn't. I don't know why you would ever do that, but hey, I'm not Wikipedia. But other than that, everything is exactly the same. Because, like I said, the frames are exactly the same. The slides are mostly the same with some milling and weight differences. Now, which do I prefer? Drum roll, please. Now, really, should it be a drum roll? Because if you don't know what I'm about to say, I don't know. But I prefer the 9mm much more. And let me tell you why. Not that the 40 is a bad gun at all, but I'll tell you why I prefer the 9mm. Here's just a small list of my reasons. Let's get the stupid one out of the way. Let's just say it right off the bat and bury the hatchet. James Bond uses the 9mm. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk serious. This pistol was designed for 9mm. So 40 was just kind of, it was adapted to that. I'm not saying that affects reliability, but wouldn't you think that you would want the one that it was actually designed for? But that's not a huge thing. Some big things are the recoil. Yes, the 40 recoils considerably more than the 9mm because you have such a lightweight frame and you have 9mm versus 40. 40 is a snappy cartridge already. You add to that a light pistol. It's a little hard to get follow-up shots on the 40. Not impossible, you'll just definitely get them a lot faster on the 9mm. The price of the ammo, much cheaper on 9mm. You can get a box of 9mm currently at the time of this video. If we're talking, just say federal, you can get a box of federal 9mm for $12 and 40 is like $18. So that's nothing to be sneezed at. Capacity, I would much rather have the 15 and the 9mm. Again, ignore the fact that we're in the People's Republic of New York here. I'd much rather have the 15 and the 9mm than the 12 and the 40. And I don't think you're getting that much of a power increase in the 40. With modern ammunition, we're talking, your hollow points or your strange polymers tipped and critical defense and gold dot and spear and all that stuff. In a 9mm defense round and a 40 defense round, I really can't honestly say you're getting that much of a difference. I'm no ballistics expert here, but just from what I've seen, I can't say that there's a definitive advantage. I'd much rather have the quicker follow-up shots and the more rounds. So definitely prefer the 9mm. Plus, it's the original. It's James Bond carries it and all that good stuff. Yes, you can't forget about that fact. He carries the 9mm. If you've ever seen the close-ups in the movies, you'll see that quite clearly. You can see the milling on the front of the slide. That's a little tip. If you ever see one in the movie or see one for sale or see a picture of one, if you ever want to tell what it is really fast, look at the milling on the front of the slide. You can easily tell that's a 40 because it just keeps going straight. You can tell that's a 9mm because it has that milling on the front there. That's the easiest way to tell if you've ever wondered, so you don't have to ask that question, because I see that a lot on P99 videos. Hey, is that the 40 or is that the 9? Somebody showed that to me a long time ago, and I can't believe I never noticed that, but yes, that is the big difference, the milling on the slides there. But these are both Gen 1. This was made in 1997, if you look at the date code here, which is gonna focus, of course it is. Yes, KH, which is 1997, and the other one was KK, which is 1999. Because they skipped J. In case you're wondering, I didn't screw that up. So they're both Gen 1. I much prefer the Gen 1 over the Gen 2. I just love the looks of the Gen 1 frame and the slide. I love the smaller serrations as opposed to the larger ones on the Gen 2s. I don't like the ambidextrous slide stops that some of them have, but nothing wrong with the Gen 2s. I just much prefer the Gen 1s. It's much more of a classic look. And I like the smaller ambidextrous magazine release. Oh, let me talk something about while we're on the subject of P99s here. Some people actually use this as a criticism for this gun, and it just drives me bananas. Oh, I don't like the magazine release for this reason right here. Let me take my 9mm because it's the one we're showing off now. Put the mag in. They say this, oh man, this gun's a piece of crap. It's got that European mag release. I can't even reach it with my thumb without having to readjust. What if I told you that you can get to the mag release much easier with either the middle finger or your trigger finger on the opposite hand? And in fact, I much prefer this method. I much prefer this method of magazine release here. Ready? Ready for a magic trick? Ta-da! I don't understand how people can't realize that, you can just hit it with your other finger, but I see that all the time. There's a lot of crazy people out here on YouTube. So now that I've showed you the differences between the 40 and the 9, I hope you can make a better informed decision if you're going to pick one of these up. Now the prices, I actually paid more for the 40, but I think that's just because I wasn't looking around enough, and I just kind of made I jumped the gun on my buying decision. But I paid like $5.95 for that out the door from Gunbroker, and I paid like $4.85 for the this one over here. The one on the left, the 40, was new old stock. It had never been shot, but it was still, from the older Gen 1 days. The one on the right was used, but less than 100 rounds. I know, that's probably a marketing scheme from the seller, but, when I got it and I took it down, if the guy had put 100 rounds through it, I would be severely surprised. It was really nice. I mean, not even sometimes you start to get the tinnifer start coming off. I don't know if it's doing it on this one. Maybe there near the barrel a little bit. You'll start to get the coating to wear off a little bit. This one hasn't even started any of that. The barrel hood hasn't even started losing its black yet. So if he even put 100 rounds through it, I'd be surprised. But for $4.85, I can't complain. So I hope I showed you the differences between these two firearms in this very long-winded video, but hey, some people like talking about the P99s, and I know I often wondered what the difference between the 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson version was, so now that you know the basics, the milling on the slide, the weight, the capacity, the recoil, as I mentioned a little bit later, and the perhaps thickness, which, like I said, I don't agree with that statement. I hope you can make a better decision. My recommendation goes to the 9mm. If you're a fan of the 40, or if you have other pistols in the 40, or if you do believe that you get more firepower, by all means get the 40. Either of them are fantastic pistols. Oh, I will say a possible negative for the 9mm. I'll get this in before I wrap up this video. It's a little bit easier to limp wrist. Now, what I'm talking about is coming from the powerful recoil of the 40. When I went over to the 9mm, I forgot that I was shooting 9mm for a little while, and I limp wristed one of the shots, and I'm like, what did I just do? Did I just limp wrist it? And to prove to myself that I did in fact just limp wrist it, I tried to hold it with a very loose grip, and yeah, I could do it on cue. I could get it to limp wrist on cue. I just tightened up my grip, and then I never had another problem. Like I said, it has very low rounds through it, so it's still in its break-in period, so I can't really fault either. I cannot really fault it for that. Jeez, I'm getting all tongue-tied because I'm going on a 24-minute video here. But yeah, so that might be another thing you might want to consider. If you're bad at limp wristing, you might want to go to the 40. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and go out and buy one. That's what I say. Or at least buy a PPQ, buy a Walther. You got to get in the family. So thanks for watching. Take it easy, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.